Are we excited this morning? Oh, wow. Hey, we get together here, and our hopes and desires is to make a difference for everybody and help some of you just to get the belief in you, and we hope to change some of you into maybe going from wishing to doing. And I have a good friend backstage that wants to come out, and I don't know who could explain our vision and our dreams for this event better than my good friend that got into the company with us. I think he got in 2019, and he has a story that I heard some of it, and it's so inspirational. Why don't you guys help me welcome to the stage my good friend Harvey Bontrager?
Good morning. I really didn't want to kind of wanted to back out last night of doing this, but after hearing George give his testimony, I mean, what's my excuse? Wasn't that really something? Such an inspiring, and what really stood out to me with George was his attitude, his sense of humor about his situation. So it really played into what I'd like to share. Today, I've got two questions for you. And the number one question is, what is the biggest nation on the face of the earth? And number two is, what does it really mean to be not free? And sharing my story, I hope that I can help someone connect these two dots to these two questions. Well, the first answer to the first question is, some of you might be thinking the biggest nation, it might be China, right? But actually, the biggest nation on the face of the earth today is imagination. Imagination can take you down so fast, and it can elevate you to a place you never thought you could be at. Imagination can also be explained in this little story of a lady that thought she was real pretty. You know, she'd walk past the mirror and she would look at herself and really think, man, I'm really something. And she just spent so much time there, she finally felt somewhat to the fact that, man, I just got too much pride. I just felt condemned about all this pride, but she just couldn't help herself looking at herself and realizing how pretty she was. And so finally, it got the best of her, and she went to her pastor, and she told her story about, you know, feeling condemned about having too much pride. And the pastor just took a long look at her and studied her, and finally he just said, "Sister, it's not pride, it's imagination." You know, we think that's kind of hilarious, but we do that to ourselves too. And before you know it, you realize that you don't really know who you are. And then the other one, the answer to the other question was, what does it really mean to be not free? And in being not free, if research has shown that you've got two brains, one's down here in your stomach area, and the other one hopefully up in your head somewhere. Um, and according to research, there's over 100 million nerves that line your stomach area. And these 100 million nerves really let you know how you feel. And I think most of us can relate to that. So if your imagination goes haywire, it can literally turn your stomach into knots. Now, at first, not free would sound like something like, if you ever been to a church service, they'll tell you, be free from sin. Or Dave Ramsey might tell you, be debt free, right? But to be not free is a whole nother story. When your stomach is tied up into knots, it's difficult for people to be around you. When your imagination goes like that lady, I thought she was too pretty. It's not who you are, and it can tie your stomach up into knots. So, research will tell you that these nerves can literally make you sick and make you to where you look at your perspective is so different. So, with that, I'd like to share my story. Um, at about 26, I started my imagination, seeing what was out there, and I like to explore things. I don't like a 9 to 5 job. It's not me. So, I the first thing I did was start to train horses, and I did a lot of them. And it's just like really like selling a roof. If you can get a horse's trust, you can get along with him just fine. But there's always balkers, right? And a baseball bat doesn't seem to help either. But we did that for a while, and so the next thing I did was we started um, doing survival blankets, football blankets, sewing stuff, and got into sewing a neighbor's buggy curtain, and it turned into a business where we turned into in 4 years we were up to the largest carriage manufacturer in the U.S. selling carriages, wedding carriages to Russia internationally. Um, and I really enjoyed it. There's so much of the field was so large that you could go anywhere with it, and that was what I liked. Um, but it got too big. We sold it and started to farm, and I and again, farming's an age old practice. And so I believe I was one of the first ones that run a hot wire through a field to graze your cows. They thought I was crazy, but now it's a pretty popular thing. Um, but then I discovered that farming is um, you basically buy everything retail and sell everything wholesale and pay shipping both ways. So that didn't work out too good. We started raising produce, started a produce auction, and we had a bakery, a nursery, selling a lot of hanging baskets, and so we tried a lot of different things, and I loved it. It's what I love to do is finding new opportunities, and my imagination was working. I was being creative in what we were doing and doing things out of the box. But in 2001, um, how many of you have ever been in a recession where an economic downturn? Um, yeah, quite a number of us. But in the 2001, the dot-com recession, we got our first hit, and um, it really slowed things down. And most of you know that if you have a business, starting up a business, it will take a good 5 years before it cash flows. That's just a law of business, 3 to 5 years. So we had 5 businesses that were trying to cash flow. It didn't work by the time that economic downturn came. So by the 2007, we lost everything. Regulated banking, the housing market crash. Um, it was um, it was a hard thing to do. Like Joe Mullet explained last night, there's no words to express it. Um, so at that time, what is there to do? If you spend your last $50 to go look for a job and there's no jobs to be had. And speaking to your creditors, and it's a something that happens in your stomach, you're not realizing it, but it will literally turn into a knot. Um, and it can make you see things in a totally different way that you never imagined. But I learned one thing: it's okay for a grown man to cry. That's okay, and we did that. Um, so the 2008 after that um, was basically survival, and you always wanted to get that imagination going, and you knew that this was not the end of it, but it's still reality. Well, by surviving at the jumping up to about 2019, here I was, 59 years old, and wanting to retire, tired. That knot in my stomach was not making me a good person to be around. Um, the At the 2008, I had a breakdown. I couldn't even get out of bed. Suicidal thoughts. They put me on antidepressant medicine. That imagination was getting the best of me. Um, Fortunately, uh, a few months after they started giving me antidepressant medicine, um, I had a meeting with the Lord, and I never took another bit of antidepressant medicine. Amen. And so, jumping up to 2019 again, it was still survival. The knot was still there. It was still there, and everything I looked at, it was just almost seemed impossible. My son Merle signed me up in 2019, and it looked hopeless. It looked absolutely hopeless. I had a Duramax that um, smoked like crazy in a trailer that you had to close the doors a certain way to get it to work, and the panels flopping on the outside, rusted through, and it's all we had. And started cold calling, just went cold calling every day. And I get home, my wife would say, "You're just what's the matter with you? You're white. You look sick," and that's what happens. So that we broke through, did a couple repairs, and just kept on going. And in the I remember in the convention 2020, um, we scraped enough funds to I thought it was paid, and we got in there to the convention. Um, and of course, somehow it didn't register. So we had to come up with the admission again. Um, and at that point, we didn't have enough money to even go out to eat. We had enough to get home. So it'll ever be for branded in my mind that sitting in that buying some canned food and sitting at the lobby of the hotel there at the convention, and there was no microwaves in the room, right? So we had to eat our soup in the lobby of the hotel room. That's how broke we were. But I'll never forget. Christy Nolan was speaking that day. How many of you remember that? And she said something that really, you hear things and you think, well, it's good, but it just kept on bugging me. And she said that she was sitting there looking at the shape that the country was in, and thinking how bad it is, and people doing weird stuff, and the thought came to her that if nobody else is going to do it, who will? And it just kind of resonated with me. And we got home, um, tried the best to cold call, nothing happened. It was just dead. My son Merle was closing roofs like crazy, and I came out to the Erie meeting um, later on that spring, and I mean, a lot of you guys were saying like, Yeah, I closed 7 acres last week, you know? Here it was just like, I don't know what to do. But we just kept on persevering, trying to keep that imagination alive and dealing with this knot in my stomach. And, yeah, so, uh, and in May, the last of May, I closed my first roof. All we had was my trailer, my truck, and my son Kenny, which was about 16 years old at the time. We started roofing, and all of a sudden, jobs started closing. We just went from one job to the next. I don't know how we did it, but it's just me and Kenny. We still made preferred by August the first year, and it was a driving along one day, just thank the Lord how things turned out. I realized I had a lot of money in the bank, and I didn't have any credit anywhere. Conklin would never give me credit at that point, and so it was basic giving deposit, getting it ordered, and doing the job, just moving one by one, and so after realizing I had that amount, I knew our mortgage was around 256,000, and plus some other credit card debts. By the way, we do not own a credit card at all, none. That's really what got us into trouble. But this $256,000 mortgage was like a chain around my neck. It was in my that knot in my stomach. I didn't even really realize it. It's there. But so I swung the truck around and drove up to the bank and said, "You know what? We had $13,000 close to paying it off in my checking account." I couldn't believe it. And so I walked up to the bank teller, and I knew her, and usually I would be the one coming and asking if she could extend the payment, just a couple of weeks. So she knew me, and I said, "I'd like to pay off that mortgage today." Well, most of it. And she looked at me and started to cry. It's the most amazing thing. I guess, um, and I started to cry. It's okay to cry in the bank. And while I was sitting there, she was getting everything ready, and I get a text from one of my clients and said, "That check you've been holding is for about $14,000." She said, "You can deposit that if you want." And so I looked at her and said, "I'll just pay it all." It's amazing. And after I got out, I was just praising the Lord on the way home, told my wife about it. If you're 59 years old with no hope, I don't know how we did it, but the Lord helped us. And after a bit, after telling my wife about it, I realized, wow, that knot's gone. I didn't even realize it. For the first time, I could eat a whole meal. For the first time, I could wake up feeling refreshed. I'm not saying money is your all in all, but if you let your imagination rule you into thinking this is impossible, I can't do it, you will have a knot in your stomach. There's no doubt about it. So I just wanted to share my story today in hopes that would resonate, help you. If you're not closing roofs and you're in debt, don't give up. Let your imagination work. So I'll close with this thought. There's really no good or bad situation. It's just your thinking that makes it so.
Wow, give Harvey another hand for that. That was amazing. I was at Harvey's office probably 2 months ago, and there was about 15 of us in that office, and he shared that story in about 5 minutes, just a short little story, and when Rudy Byler and I drove away that night, I said, "He's gotta share that story with our group because it touched the 15 of us that were in that room so much." Isn't that an amazing story? Like, I don't know what business you can be in that in a couple years you can go to the bank and pay off a $256,000 mortgage. But I can guarantee you, back then I didn't know Harvey that well, but I can guarantee you he was hungry. And that's what made him do whatever it took. That's why he'd go cold calling. And he told us, like, it's the last thing he wanted to do. But it was the only way to change the situation. And he'd come home white and wore out. And you know what? He has one of the best roofing companies in this entire room today. I've sat with his whole team, his roofing company team, multiple times in the last 3 months. And we spent a couple hours just diving into the business and looking at things. And he's got an amazing team of people that work for him today in his roofing companies, as well as he's building a great team of contractors as well. So it's amazing that every one of you guys, I would encourage every one of you guys, there's a Harvey somewhere out there that's looking for this opportunity. Make a commitment, every one of you guys, to bring somebody along that it'll change their lives the same way as it changed Harvey's life, because that's why we do this business.